Two deputies pulled over an elderly black couple without cause. What followed was a fight for justice that would expose deep-rooted police misconduct. Clarence Dupree kept both hands firmly on the steering wheel, his left turn signal blinking steadily, despite the blue and red lights flashing behind his car. It was a familiar stretch of Highway 84 just outside Valdosta, Georgia, a quiet, two-lane road, lined with tall pines. One Clarence and his wife Evelyn had driven dozens of times, but tonight felt different. The car slowed, and moments later, two deputies approached. One on Clarence's side, tall and lean with mirrored sunglasses. The other shorter and stockier, moving around to the passenger side. Clarence cracked the window a bit, calm but alert. "License and registration," the taller deputy ordered flatly. Then, "Step out of the vehicle, sir." Clarence blinked in surprise. "Is there a reason I'm being asked to step out?" The deputy's jaw tightened. "You got a problem following a lawful order?" Clarence held steady. "You said it was a broken taillight. But our taillights aren't broken." The deputies ignored him, and Evelyn, sitting beside him, was told to exit the car as well. She did so with grace and dignity, hands calmly visible the entire time. The deputies rifled through the car, searching bags and the trunk, chuckling as if they were having a private joke. After 10 long minutes, they returned with a citation for a busted taillight. Clarence accepted the paper quietly, already knowing he would fight it. As the deputies walked away, laughing between themselves, Clarence looked down at the ticket, a symbol of the harassment that had just begun. Evelyn broke the silence. "They thought we'd be scared," Clarence nodded. "They don't know who we are." With quiet resolve, Clarence pulled off the highway onto Route 133. In his pocket was a notebook, a brown leather-bound companion he'd kept for years, where every word and detail of the stop was meticulously recorded. This was not just a random encounter. It was a deliberate challenge to their dignity and rights. Back in the sheriff's office, Deputies Riggins and Nash kicked back, dismissing Clarence as just an old man with a smart mouth. But they had no idea Clarence was a retired attorney, a man who had built courtrooms and dismantled systems far more complex than their little roadside harassment. Later that night, Clarence sat in his study flipping through the notebook, reviewing every line, every insult, every moment of calm defiance. Evelyn stood by the window, arms folded, watching. "This isn't just for us," Clarence said softly. "It's for everyone they've done this to." He picked up the phone and dialed Rosalind, a trusted ally. When she answered, he gave her the deputies' names and the details. "I've heard those names before," she said quietly. "Internal Affairs flagged them, but the sheriff shut it down." They both knew the fight ahead would be uphill, but Clarence wasn't new to this. This was a man who waited for the right reason to strike back, armed with the law and a fierce sense of justice. As night deepened, the quiet determination between Clarence and Evelyn grew stronger. They weren't just fighting a ticket. They were fighting a system that assumed some people didn't deserve dignity or respect, and they planned to remind everyone otherwise. The deputies' cruiser taillights faded into the distance, leaving Clarence and Evelyn Dupree sitting quietly in their car for a moment longer. The night air felt heavy, thick with the weight of what had just happened. Clarence took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had faced bigger battles before, but tonight was different, personal. The taillight citation was just the tip of the iceberg. "Did you get their badge numbers?" Evelyn asked softly, her voice calm but edged with resolve. Clarence reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather notebook. He flipped through its pages, scanning his neat, handwritten notes from the traffic stop. "Every detail," he said simply. "Names, words, times, all here." Evelyn nodded approvingly. "Good. We're not letting this slide." Clarence was a retired attorney, a man who had spent decades fighting for justice. He'd built courtrooms, argued landmark cases, and dismantled corrupt systems. Tonight, though, he was reminded how power could still be abused in small, cruel ways, ways that chipped away at a person's dignity. But Clarence wasn't about to let those deputies write the next chapter. Back in Tallahassee, Clarence sat at his desk under the harsh glow of a desk lamp, spreading out documents, notes, and case law. His study, once a sanctuary for legal strategy, was now a war room. Across from him, Evelyn sorted through old files, her judicial past coming alive again as she prepared to stand beside her husband in this fight. The call to Rosalind Thomas, a trusted former colleague with deep connections in law enforcement oversight, had been a turning point. Rosalind had dug into the deputies' backgrounds and surfaced troubling findings. Both Carl Riggins and Tyler Nash had been flagged by Internal Affairs multiple times for misconduct, complaints that were quietly dismissed or suppressed by the sheriff's office. "These aren't isolated incidents," Rosalind explained over the phone. "There's a pattern here: abuse of power, racial profiling, intimidation." Clarence felt a spark of both frustration and determination. This wasn't just about a taillight citation anymore. It was about systemic injustice. Together, Clarence, Evelyn, and Rosalind mapped out a plan. They would file a federal civil rights complaint under Section 1983, challenging not only the illegal stop and search, but the broader policies that allowed officers like Riggins and Nash to operate with impunity. They gathered witness statements, requested dash cam footage from the gas station near the stop, and compiled a timeline of events and violations. Meanwhile, in Georgia, deputies Riggins and Nash remained oblivious to the storm brewing. Riggins joked with Nash about the old man who thought he was a lawyer, confident their actions would be dismissed as routine policing. But even Nash felt a flicker of doubt. Clarence's quiet confidence was unsettling, the kind of calm that suggested a storm was coming. As the lawsuit was filed, word began to spread in law enforcement circles. Sheriff Donald Creedy, a 26-year veteran, was not amused. He called Riggins and Nash into his office, warning them to get good lawyers and keep quiet. But the damage was done. The case caught the attention of local media and civil rights groups. Supporters began to gather, drawn by the story of Clarence and Evelyn, a dignified couple standing up against unchecked police power. The courtroom was packed on the morning of the hearing. Reporters lined the walls, law students sat eagerly in the back rows, and community members filled every available seat. The air buzzed with anticipation. This was more than a traffic stop trial. It was a test of justice. Clarence looked calm and composed as he prepared to take the stand. Evelyn, carrying her old judge's nameplate as a symbol of their shared dedication to the law, stood quietly by his side. When the session began, Clarence delivered a powerful opening statement. He recounted his childhood memory of his father being wrongfully stopped and searched, a haunting echo of racial injustice. He spoke of the law's promise to protect dignity and rights, and how those promises were broken during their roadside encounter. "I didn't come here for sympathy," Clarence told the judge. "I came for accountability, for the principle that no one, regardless of age, race, or status, should be subjected to harassment and unlawful search." The prosecution then introduced damning evidence: security footage showing the Dupree's car leaving the gas station with both taillights functioning perfectly, dispatch records revealing the deputies did not radio in any suspicion before the stop, and internal affairs files exposing prior complaints against the deputies. When Deputy Carl Riggins took the stand, Clarence confronted him calmly, asking detailed questions that exposed contradictions and falsehoods in Riggins' statements. Clarence produced his notebook, reading the deputy's insults aloud, including calling him a smart-mouth old man. Riggins' confidence visibly cracked. Next came Deputy Nash, who was forced to acknowledge previous internal complaints for discriminatory remarks. Under pressure, both deputies struggled to justify their conduct. Throughout, Clarence maintained his composure, presenting facts like a skilled attorney. His voice was steady, his questions precise, exposing a pattern of misconduct. By the end of the day, it was clear the case had struck a nerve. The judge nodded thoughtfully. The courtroom's energy shifted, and Clarence felt the tide beginning to turn. Outside, community leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens praised the Dupree's courage. The story was no longer just about one traffic stop. It was about challenging a system that allowed such abuses to persist. Clarence and Evelyn returned home, tired but determined. They knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, justice felt within reach. The morning after the opening statements, the courtroom was buzzing. Clarence Dupree arrived early, sharp in his charcoal gray suit, calm but ready. Evelyn walked beside him carrying her old judge's briefcase, a quiet reminder of their shared history and commitment. The air felt heavy with anticipation. This wasn't just another case. This was personal. The prosecution began by replaying the gas station security footage. Clarence's Buick pulled smoothly from the lot, both taillights glowing clearly. The timestamp showed this was mere minutes before the traffic stop. The jurors exchanged glances. The evidence was undeniable. Next came the dispatch logs. The records made it clear. The deputies didn't radio in any suspicion or reason for the stop before pulling Clarence over. The violation wasn't recorded until 10 minutes after the encounter. This wasn't a routine stop. It was an afterthought, a story made up to justify an unlawful action. Clarence's lawyer made a powerful point. This isn't just a mistake. It's a violation of constitutional rights. It's about power, control, and disregard for the law. Then, the focus shifted to the deputies' records. Rosalind Thomas, a trusted ally and expert on police misconduct, laid out a detailed report. Both deputies Riggins and Nash had long histories of complaints: racial profiling, intimidation, excessive force. One file showed Riggins was even suspended for a previous incident involving unnecessary force during a traffic stop. Nash had faced accusations of making racist comments at DUI checkpoints. But all these complaints had been quietly ignored or dismissed by the sheriff's department. The courtroom murmured as Rosalind spoke of a system protecting its own, silencing victims and covering up misconduct. When Deputy Carl Riggins took the stand, the mood shifted. He looked uncomfortable, his usual bravado gone. Clarence approached slowly, notebook in hand. "Deputy Riggins," Clarence began calmly, "why did you pull over my vehicle on June 4th? "Broken taillight, sir," Riggins answered, clearly uneasy. Clarence didn't miss a beat. "Can you point to which taillight was broken?" Riggins glanced at the footage playing on the screen. "The left one." Clarence raised an eyebrow. "Is there any record of that damage being reported or repaired?" The deputy hesitated. "No, sir." Clarence pressed further. "Did you notify dispatch of any suspicion before the stop?" "No, sir," Riggins admitted. Clarence flipped to a page in his notebook and read aloud. "At 3:37 p.m., just after I declined your request to search my car, you called me a smart-mouth old man. Care to explain?" Riggins looked down, silent. The questioning continued, peeling back layers of dishonesty and revealing a disturbing pattern of behavior. Next, Deputy Tyler Nash took the stand. He was asked about a previous complaint for racist remarks. He had to confirm it, his discomfort visible. Despite the defense's attempts to downplay these allegations, the evidence painted a troubling picture: a department riddled with unchecked bias and intimidation tactics. Throughout, Clarence was the picture of composure, answering questions with calm precision, his experience shining through. His quiet strength contrasted starkly with the deputy's growing unease. The day reached a powerful moment when Clarence shared a childhood memory: his father's wrongful stop and search, the pain and fear it caused. His voice softened, but his words carried weight. The courtroom fell silent. "This isn't just about a traffic stop," Clarence said. "It's about generations who have suffered injustice. It's about dignity. And today, We stand for that. The judge nodded thoughtfully as the courtroom absorbed the gravity of his words. As the session ended, the energy had shifted. What started as a simple citation was now a deep dive into systemic injustice. Outside, community members gathered, inspired by Clarence and Evelyn's courage. Their story was sparking hope and conversations about accountability. Back home, Clarence and Evelyn reviewed the day quietly. The road ahead was long, but this was progress. "It's not just about us," Clarence said. "It's about making sure no one else goes through this." Evelyn smiled, her eyes full of determination. "We'll see it through." Part 2 closed with that unspoken promise: a fight for justice, dignity, and change. The courtroom was packed again as the trial entered its critical third day. Clarence Dupree sat quietly, the weight of the moment pressing on him, but never breaking his calm. Evelyn was nearby, a steady presence with her usual quiet strength. This was no ordinary case anymore. It had become a fight for justice, dignity, and the exposure of a pattern that affected countless others. The prosecution opened with a witness who had observed one of Deputy Carl Riggins's earlier traffic stops. The woman, a local resident, spoke with clear, unwavering conviction. She described watching Riggins confront a young black man over a minor traffic violation. The deputy's approach was aggressive, disproportionate to the situation, and clearly meant to intimidate. "He wasn't enforcing the law," she said. "He was trying to scare him, make him feel small." Her testimony was met with attentive silence. Jurors leaned forward. Even the judge appeared engaged. This was the first glimpse of the deputy's behavior outside Clarence's case, a thread in a wider fabric of misconduct. Next, a former sheriff's office employee took the stand. The man's demeanor was cautious, but sincere. He spoke of a department culture where loyalty was prized above justice. Officers who raised concerns about misconduct faced retaliation, subtle and overt. "People were scared to speak up," he admitted. "If you did, you risked your career and safety. The system protected people like Riggins and Nash, no matter what they did." Clarence glanced at Evelyn, who nodded slightly. They had known from the start that this was about more than just one incident. It was a systemic problem. The defense attorneys tried to discredit these witnesses, calling them disgruntled or biased. But cross-examination revealed consistent, detailed stories that stood firm under scrutiny. The truth was clear and unyielding. Then came the turning point. Clarence was called to the stand. He rose with steady confidence and addressed the court with a calm authority, born of decades of legal experience. He recounted the details of the traffic stop, the calm, respectful demeanor he and Evelyn maintained despite the hostility. He spoke of the moment the deputies demanded to search the car, the insults hurled his way, and the unjust citation issued for a non-existent, broken taillight. "I have spent my life fighting for the rights of those without a voice," Clarence told the court. "Tonight, I stand not just for myself and my wife, but for every person subjected to unlawful stops, intimidation, and abuse of power." His testimony was deeply personal. He shared memories of his father, who had been wrongfully stopped and searched while walking home from work, a moment seared into Clarence's memory. "He told me then, 'If you fight back too hard, you might never come home,'" Clarence said, his voice heavy with emotion. The courtroom was silent, hanging on his every word. Clarence explained how those early experiences had shaped his career, a lifelong battle to hold the powerful accountable. "What happened on Highway 84 was not just about a traffic stop," he said. "It was about respect, fairness, and dignity, and those are things no one should have to fight for." The jury listened intently as Clarence addressed the deputies directly. "You thought you could humiliate us, dismiss our rights, and walk away. But this court is here to say that's not how justice works." The deputies sat stiffly, unable to meet his gaze. Following Clarence's testimony, The prosecution called on legal experts and civil rights advocates to explain the constitutional implications. They described the broader issue of racial profiling and unlawful searches that plague law enforcement nationwide, placing Clarence's experience in a larger context. Outside the courthouse, the community rallied. Civil rights groups, activists, and everyday citizens turned out in support of Clarence and Evelyn. Their story had become a symbol of resistance, a beacon for those who had suffered in silence. Inside, the defense scrambled. Their strategy shifted to damage control, filing last-minute motions to exclude evidence and questioning the credibility of witnesses. But the mounting evidence, combined with Clarence's calm and compelling testimony, left them with little ground to stand on. As the day wound down, Evelyn leaned toward Clarence quietly. "They're rattled," she whispered. Clarence nodded, exhaustion evident but his spirit unbroken. "Good, let them be." The fight was far from over, but the tide was turning. Clarence and Evelyn had taken a simple traffic stop and turned it into a powerful challenge to a system that too often shielded abuse. The courtroom was no longer just a place of trial. It was a stage for truth, dignity, and hope. The courtroom hummed with a tense energy as the trial reached its most critical phase. Everyone present could feel it. This was more than just a legal proceeding about a traffic stop gone wrong. This was a confrontation with a system that had for too long allowed abuse to thrive unchecked. Clarence Dupree sat quietly, composed but resolute, while Evelyn's calm support steadied the atmosphere. The eyes of the jurors, the press, and the public were all fixed on what would unfold next. The prosecution called their first witness of the day, a seasoned internal affairs investigator who had spent years navigating the complexities of police misconduct investigations. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many cases buried or ignored. "Internal affairs is supposed to protect the public by holding officers accountable," he began. "But what I encountered was a culture bent on protecting its own. Complaints were often dismissed without proper investigation. Evidence went missing, witnesses were intimidated, and misconduct was swept under the rug." He recounted specific cases where officers accused of serious violations were quietly returned to duty. There was an unspoken rule to keep things internal, to avoid public scrutiny at almost any cost. The courtroom grew silent. Jurors exchanged uneasy glances. The implication was clear. This wasn't just about one or two bad cops. It was a systemic problem. Next, a forensic analyst took the stand, her voice clear and precise. She guided the jury through the evidence collected: security footage, dispatch records, and audio recordings, all of which painted a damning picture. The footage showed Clarence's car leaving the gas station with both taillights fully functional. Dispatch logs confirmed no suspicion or reason for the stop was communicated before it happened. And the audio recording revealed Deputies Riggins and Nash mocking Clarence and Evelyn with cruel jokes and slurs immediately after the stop. The courtroom was stunned as the voices played through the speakers. The deputies' casual cruelty and disregard for procedure were undeniable. Clarence sat stoic, absorbing the weight of years of injustice distilled into those few minutes of audio. The defense attempted to downplay the recording, suggesting it was taken out of context or simply banter. But the jury's reaction was telling. The damage was irreversible. Clarence was then called back to the stand. His voice was steady, but his words carried the deep emotional toll of the experience. "I have spent my entire career defending others, standing up for their rights," he said. "But this personal violation has tested me in ways no courtroom battle ever has." He described how the incident had cast a long shadow over their lives, seeping into their days and nights with constant vigilance and anxiety. "This isn't just about a traffic stop," he continued. "It's about respect. It's about dignity. It's about the right to be treated as a human being regardless of your race or age." The courtroom fell silent, the gravity of his message sinking in. Civil rights experts followed, placing Clarence and Evelyn's experience in a broader national context of racial profiling and police misconduct. They urged the jury to consider the systemic nature of the problem and the urgent need for accountability and reform. Outside, the case had galvanized the community. Vigils were held, local leaders spoke out, and social media buzzed with support. Clarence and Evelyn had become beacons of courage for many who had long suffered in silence. Inside, the defense's tactics grew desperate. They filed motions to exclude evidence and attacked witnesses' credibility, trying to distract from the growing mountain of truth. But the dignity and calm resolve of Clarence and Evelyn, backed by solid evidence, left the defense with little room to maneuver. As the day wound down, Evelyn leaned toward Clarence and whispered softly, "They're rattled." Clarence nodded, exhaustion visible but spirit unbroken. "Good. Let them be." That night, in the quiet comfort of their home, they reflected on the path ahead. "We've shaken the system," Clarence said quietly. "But change doesn't come easy. We have to keep pushing." Evelyn smiled, fierce and hopeful. "We will. For ourselves, and for those who can't." And with that, Part 4 closed on a note of powerful determination. Justice was still on the horizon, but the fight was far from over. The courtroom was heavy with silence as the jury filed back in, faces unreadable, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Clarence Dupree stood tall, every muscle taut, the weight of the entire ordeal pressing down on him. Across the room, the county's attorneys shifted nervously, their confident postures faltering as the foreperson cleared their throat to read the verdict. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiffs," the foreperson announced, voice steady but firm. "It is our determination that Deputies Carl Riggins and Tyler Nash violated the constitutional rights of Clarence and Evelyn Dupree through an unlawful stop and search, and through conduct unbecoming of law enforcement officers." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, swelling into a wave of emotion. Relief, vindication, and something deeper. A quiet victory for justice. Clarence's lips pressed into a thin line as the gravity of those words settled over him. Years of struggle, pain, and resilience had culminated in this moment. The judge's gavel struck, a sharp punctuation that ended the trial, but marked the beginning of change. Outside, the crowd erupted in applause. Supporters, activists, community members, all rallied around Clarence and Evelyn. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Clarence raised his hand, signaling for quiet. "This isn't just about us," he said, voice strong but humble. "It's about every person who has ever been silenced, pushed down, or made to feel powerless. This victory belongs to all of us." Evelyn squeezed his hand, her smile quiet but fierce. They had fought not for revenge, but for accountability, for a system that respects the dignity of every human being. The county was ordered to pay damages and implement reforms, including training on constitutional rights and oversight to prevent future abuses. Deputies Riggins and Nash faced suspensions, pending further review. But the victory was bittersweet. Clarence knew this was one battle in a much larger war against systemic injustice. The scars from that night, and the countless nights like it, would not fade overnight. Back home, Clarence sat on the porch with Evelyn, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The fight had changed them, strengthened their resolve and deepened their commitment. "We made them listen," Clarence said softly. Evelyn nodded. "And now, we keep pushing. For change, for justice, for those who come after us." Their story became a beacon, inspiring others to stand up, speak out, and fight back. It wasn't just about a broken taillight. It was about shining a light on the shadows, holding the powerful accountable, and reminding the world that no one is above the law. "The law may be blind," Clarence mused, "but justice sees with unwavering clarity when courage refuses to be silenced.